Good morning, everyone. This is Brennan Decima, owner of Decima Wealth Consulting. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the foundations of financial planning, and whether you're hiring someone or you're doing it on your own. I think there's five key tenets that are critical as you get your finances in order. So I'll cover all of them, and then I'll dive a little bit deeper. But the first thing is really taxes, right? So taxes, whether you're working or retired, are typically the biggest expense that you're going to face. Number two, it's going to be risk management, making sure that you're not overexposed to surprise risk or unnecessary pitfalls. Number three is going to be income planning. Number four is going to be healthcare. And number five is going to be estate planning. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. So the crux of any financial plan is going to start with taxes, right? And why taxes? We know the IRS is going to take their cut. So making sure you have reviewed your tax return with a financial planner or a CPA, I think is the starting point of any plan. And why is that? So I'll give you an example. I had a client that had hired a professional money manager. She decided to come work with me. The first thing we did was we dove into last year's tax return. And she was saying, I was really blindsided by how much more in taxes I owed this year versus the previous year. And then my accountant let me know that I'm paying a couple thousand more in Medicare than I previously paid. Why is that? So she was in a model portfolio. The portfolio was focused on dividend-paying stocks, generating income. She wasn't taking any income from that account. It was all coming from her IRA and her required mandatory distribution. So she had an income-focused strategy, generating a ton of income that just got reinvested. And then two, the model portfolio did a regular rebalancing and sold $68,000 worth of capital gains. No big deal in a nutshell, but she moved $3,000 into the next IRMA Medicare bracket, causing a massive jump in her Medicare cost. So had the tax form been reviewed, the capital gains sale could have been a couple $1,000s less, not been a material difference in risk, but saved her thousands in Medicare taxes. So if we get taxes wrong, everything else falls apart. So we really need to start with taxes to understand what wiggle room we have for capital gains, to understand what wiggle room we have for Roth conversions, to know what to sell, when to sell it, really to keep more dollars in your pocket. So taxes are critical. Both for accumulating and taking money out, right? Number two is going to be risk management. So the way that I think about risk management is concentration is the quickest way to accumulate wealth, right? So if you had thrown everything in NVIDIA a few years ago, you would have had a tremendous increase in wealth, right? On the other side of that, let's say you threw everything in Pfizer 4 years ago and you lost 60% of your net worth, right? So concentration, 2020 Pfizer skyrockets, 2021 through 2025 Pfizer plummets, right? So concentration can really take you to that next level. But the way that I think about this is think about compounding. So if you're going on a very long drive, right? So let's say I live in Florida, I'm driving up to New York City. Not that I would do that, but let's say I did. That drive off the top of my head is probably 14 or 15 hours, right? So if the speed limit is 70 miles per hour and I go 90, I'm going to shave a couple hours off of that trip. So the longer the journey, the more benefit speeding and taking risks can have on the journey. However, if I'm all the way up into New York and I've got a few miles remaining and I'm still going 90 miles per hour, it doesn't really make a material difference at that stage over the length of the journey. Maybe I get there a few seconds or a few minutes early, but over the course of the journey, it's a non-factor. But it does raise my risk of injury, catastrophe, accident ticket, right? So if we're at our destination, most accidents occur a block from home. Why take unnecessary risk if we're where we need to be. So how are people taking unnecessary risk? It's typically not intentional. So a lot of well-meaning publications say diversify, have a lot of different funds. Well, look behind those funds. If you have 6 different funds, but all of them hold Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Tesla, Facebook, you're not diversified. You have 5 different funds that do the same thing, right? That's like saying I have a very organized closet and I've got a white t-shirt from Hanes, a white t-shirt from Fruit of the Looms, a white Nike t-shirt, a white Adidas t-shirt. I'm diversified. No, you only have white t-shirts. It's just a different brand name on those t-shirts. Same thing with investing. Make sure that the fund is giving you risk that has exposure to different areas. Make sure everything is not concentrated, which can really go a long way. The third is income planning. So I think from a retirement standpoint, emotionally, this can be the biggest shift. So a lot of people think, I can take some risk off the table. I don't see many people having a problem with that. They may not do it, but emotionally, it's not a big deal, right? Income planning, on the other side, I think is a huge difference because our most successful retirees typically got there through discipline, patience, and time, right? So they did the right thing over and over again for decades to get to this solid nest egg, right? So that's a mindset. You need to get into an accumulation mindset and stick with it decade after decade to get to that financial summit. Well, to all of a sudden, just because you retire or resign, to be able to unwind decades of habits is not an easy thing to do. So how do we turn our nest egg into income? I think the key here is, one, not let the market dictate your ability to pay bills. So having a clearly defined income bucket and growth bucket, and then also knowing what you can spend comfortably. So a lot of people talk about the 4% rule. I think that's a very misleading number. Typically, that means you're going to die with much more than you started with. Maybe that's a priority for you. Maybe you want to balance that out and enjoy more of your hard-earned nest egg and spend more time traveling or with the family or on hobbies. So working with someone to understand, hey, here's what you can spend each and every year, I think is critical. But then creating buckets where here's your spending bucket, here's your risk bucket, mentally can go a really long way. Giving you permission to spend, giving you permission to enjoy what should be a very celebratory moment. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to all of a sudden be frivolous with your spending, but having a plan where you know how much you can spend and where that income is coming from can go a long way to helping you shift from accumulation to distribution. The fourth one is healthcare. So Medicare is very confusing. We enroll in Medicare at 65. We got parts A, B, C, and D. What the heck are they? So part A, that's going to be things like hospital visits, right? Part B is more preventative. That's doctor's visits, flu shots, things like that. Part C is actually a bundle, right? It's the combination of part A and B. It's typically by a private insurer. Normally, if you go Part C, it's also going to have things like vision and dental on top of that. And then Part D is going to be prescription, right? So understanding what you're actually covered for and where your gaps are can really help avoid major surprises because you can go get a supplement plan to plug those gaps so it's not a major out-of-pocket cost later in life as our healthcare costs dramatically rise with inflation. The other thing is understanding health savings accounts, right? So health savings accounts are the most efficient account that is out there, right? So it's basically a Roth from healthcare, but take it one step further. When you put money into a Roth, you don't get a tax deduction. It grows tax-free, but you don't get a tax deduction when it goes in. Health savings accounts, you get a tax deduction. You're reducing your taxable income when you contribute, and it grows tax-free for those future healthcare costs. Long-term care, that's probably the biggest derailment of plans I see other than people just taking unnecessary investment risk. And 70% of Americans over the age of 65 will need some type of assistance in retirement. So how do you pay for that, right? Are you going to self-fund? If you self-fund, what's the toll on your spouse? Or are we going to insure for that, right? So, I think long-term care is one of those things where a lot of people say, well, what if I don't use it? Well, hopefully you don't need it. Hopefully you don't need assistance. I don't have Progressive for my car insurance because I hope, I total my car. I hope I never need it. But in the event I do, it's not out of pocket. I'm covered, right? And same thing applies with long-term care insurance. So we have home insurance. We don't wake up every morning and say, hey, hopefully this is the day that it burns down so I get the home insurance. Maybe you feel that way. Hopefully not. But same thing with long-term care insurance. You protect. You hope you never need to collect on that claim. But if that is a really big concern for you, there's really cool hybrid policies where if you don't use it, it goes to life insurance for your heirs tax-free, which is awesome. And then the last thing is estate planning. So this is twofold, right? So this is both what happens while you're living and you can no longer take care of your affairs. So I regularly see one spouse is the financial decision maker. So if that spouse happens to have a stroke or gets dementia or just gets to an age where they can't pay the bills, file the taxes, manage the investments, does the other spouse understand what's going on? Do they have a contingency plan? Putting that in writing, having a clear contingency plan is key if you're incapacitated. So having basic financial documents, I think, is really helpful. The will, the power of attorney, the healthcare directive, it helps reduce some of that stress on your loved ones. You may need a trust. So a trust provides instructions of what happens to the assets if you become incapacitated, how they're managed, how they're distributed, who can do that for you. But it also helps you avoid probate and make sure that those assets are set up in a way to disperse after death in a way you feel comfortable with as well. And then the final thing is making sure that everything is updated. So I regularly see people add new kids or grandkids and they haven't updated their beneficiaries in 10 years, or they update the will, but they don't update the beneficiaries. So beneficiaries take precedent over what's in the will. So if you update the will but not the beneficiaries, that can really come back and haunt you. So to recap, really 5 things. The first is get the tax planning done. So if your advisor is not reviewing your tax form, everything else is just guesswork. So why leave it to guesswork if the biggest expense when you're working and retired is taxes, right? Get that right. Everything else falls into place. Number 2 is risk management in the investment. So it shouldn't just be a portfolio. It should be a broader plan. What's the risk bucket? What's the growth bucket? Do we have something that is customized to your taxes? Or is it just a model portfolio that doesn't care your bracket or your income needs? So a lot of money managers, they'll ask for your income, but their trades aren't based off your Medicare premiums. Their trades are not based off of what bucket you're pulling income from. It's just designed to say, hey, can we take more capital gains if we need to? So model portfolios are really dangerous the higher your bracket are because they're just not talking to your tax return, which cost you over and over again. So customizing that investment plan to you, whether you hire someone or not, that's key, right? Don't take more risk than you need to for your stage of life. The third is the income portfolio. So having an income plan that we understand how much we can take and where it should come from. So what's your annual high water amount if you want it? Doesn't mean you need to spend it, but at least you know what you can take. What accounts is it coming from? And then what investments are generating that cash flow? That is key. Fourth is healthcare. How are you paying for it? Do we have long-term care? Do we understand Medicare? Do we understand the health savings account? And then finally, estate planning, I think, is the last one. So making sure everything is organized in the event you cannot do it anymore, having that backup plan in place. So hopefully this is helpful. If you do need help with this, you can email us or give us a call. Visit us at www.decimawealth.com, and I hope you have a wonderful week.